this week's toy review, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I'm going to be reviewing something that I don't think a lot of people would consider a toy, but if you're a child of the 80s or even the late 70s, you definitely would. And that's the Choose Your Own Adventure series of books. Now, these things were awesome when I was a kid. You used to order these through Scholastic, which I don't even know if that's still around anymore, but if you grew up in the 80s, that was a little paper pamphlet that you would get, and usually in elementary school you wouldn't see it past like middle school, and you could order different books from that, and they'd be really cheap, like $1 to $3, maybe 4 or 5 at the very, very most. And you could get different books like the Garfield books, or Heathcliff books, or joke books, or different things like that. And one of the things you could get were the Choose Your Own Adventure series books. Now, what makes these so different is that these books actually play like a game. When you open the book, there's actually a disclaimer in the front that warns you, don't read this book from front cover to back, or you won't understand what's going on. What you do in this book is each book, like let's take Volcano here for example, it starts off with a general theme where you're on an island somewhere and your mission is to escape the erupting volcano. So you start from page 1 and everything seems simple enough, but as the story evolves, you have to make choices, and there'll be a choice where it'll say, do you want to take the wooden bridge across the river, or do you want a chance taking your horse with the other natives through the river? And depending on what choice you make, the bridge might collapse, or you might drown in the river, or everything might be fine. You move on to your next obstacle. But the really interesting thing about these is there's a lot of trial and error involved. When you get to a crossroad where you have to make a decision, it'll say, to cross the bridge, turn to page 9. To take a chance in the river with your horse, turn to page 34. A lot of times the choices that you make would either continue the story along, or you would die, and it would say, oh, your horse didn't make it, and you drowned, or the bridge collapsed out from underneath you, and you fell to your rocks to your death. And the books could be pretty grim. There was a lot of like the end pages that you were always hoping you wouldn't get, because these things are really reminiscent, if you've ever played the game Dragon's Lair. They remind me of that a lot, where you have to constantly do trial and error to figure out what's the correct way to proceed. And it can take a long, long time to finish one of these books to where you get the desired outcome of escaping the island, or we have the Cave of Time, which is one of my favorites, and the Search at the Amazon. So there's a certain predetermined outcome that you generally want, and it can take a while to figure out the correct combination of different decisions that you make, because there's only a couple different preset situations where there'd be like 12 pages you'd have to pick in general. You have to pick like page 3, page 9, page 40. And if you were able to figure that out, mainly just by guesswork, then you'd get that correct ending. Now why I said I consider these a toy is because this is in a time when Dungeons and Dragons was very big, when role-playing board games were huge. And this had a huge impact on PC gaming as well, because at the time, Dungeons and Dragons and different games like that were only books and board games, and this was the first kind of metamorphosis that you saw with a book turning into a game. And later on, as computers and software developed, you saw like wizardry or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons or things like this, even Maniac Mansion to an extent, became computer-based programs. Like Sierra made a lot of games like that, like King's Quest or Leisure Suit Larry and Zach McCracken, games where you'd have to interact with different objects and make choices in order to progress along in the story. Now, these were really awesome when I was a kid. I remember filling out the little order form in my grade school class, and you know, just waiting, you know, a week or two, and couldn't wait to get a hold of one of these books. And you know, you would trade them, you know, with your friends, and during a time when video games were still pretty new, really. And these actually came out between 1976 up until about 1994. They produced them, and there's even an app available online where you can play Choose Your Own Adventure online. But a lot of video games, you really had to use your imagination, and you did with the books too. I mean, they're very colorfully illustrated and have great pictures inside, which I'll show you guys a little bit later. But when you're playing stuff like Yar's Revenge and things like that, even though they're great games, there was something about these books that was almost better than that. I mean, number one, because the image quality was better, and there was more to it. So this showed people that board games could evolve into strategy RPGs, and that, you know, the world of RPG games could have a solid place in gaming. So these are one of my favorite things that I remember out of my childhood in general. They're just really awesome. And you know, I'll show you guys what a couple of the books look like now and inside and how they work.
Alright, so here I've got 3 of my Choose Your Own Adventure books. I have Volcano, which is one of the earlier ones, you can tell by the white border around the sides. And then The Cave of Time and Search the Amazon. Those 2 are from about 1986 to about 1987. And great cover art right off the back. I really love how they look. And as you can see, this is the Volcano book. And again, I really like the cover art. It explains on the back how the book works and what the story is about, to try to find the silver sword and stop the volcano from erupting. I like the spine on the side too, so if you collected a bunch of these, you can easily see, you know, which book is which in your collection. And you can see here it gives the warning I told you about earlier about don't read the book from front to back like you normally would with a regular book, or you'll ruin it for yourself and not understand it. So you can see here it starts off pretty normal. Every Choose Your Own Adventure book starts on page 1, and it gives you a little bit of backstory of what's going on. Down at the bottom it tells you to whatever page that you have to turn to, or you can choose to turn to. And this is where you and your friend apparently decide it's a good idea to try to go up to a volcano, which that sounds completely idiotic. And you'll flip through different pages in the book. And one of the biggest things that I had a problem with when I was a kid was not cheating, because you could always see the next page ahead of you, and you always kind of wanted to look at the next page, but that would ruin it for you. And as you can see here, here's 2 of the options. If you decide to cross the river with the horses, turn to 36. If you decide to use the bridge, turn to page 13. So this is where you'd have to make a choice, and your choices could affect, you know, whether your character in the book lives or dies, or, you know, gets in more trouble, or, you know, really does a good job. And you can see the illustrations here crossing the river, really great. And you know, I just love flipping through the books and seeing all of the different illustrations and reading the different outcomes. Like, even if one of the outcomes that I pick is good, I love picking the other one, you know, 'cause maybe it'll be bad. And sometimes it's just as cool to read the bad endings as it is the good endings. Like here, you'll see that you come across many different things in this book, including a safari hunter at the end of a bottomless pit, and he can really affect your story in this outcome, and if you choose the wrong path with him, it will lead to an early demise. Hey guys, if you like the video that you just watched, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below, and if you do the Facebook and Twitter thing, follow me at #KingRetro. See you next time!